And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it. And that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Mark. Mark reached out to me and said that he had defeated a Hat Man. So that really piqued my interest because don't hear that one too often. But he is a bit of a psychic, and he goes through houses and cleanses them for people. He's done some exorcisms, so I figured it'd be a very good episode to have him on here and share some of his experiences with us. But before we bring him on, if you've ever had an experience or a story you'd like to share and you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, there's 2 things you can do. You can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Either way, we'll get your message to me, so make sure to reach out and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. The podcast's been doing pretty well lately. I'm happy with that, but if you would like to continue to help out the podcast, you can share it around. Word of mouth is the best way to help the podcast continue to grow, so I truly appreciate everyone that's been doing that. Without you guys, the show wouldn't be where it's at. Without the guests coming on here, there would be no show, so for that, I'm truly grateful for everyone that's been helping out. If you want to continue to help out too, you can leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at. If you listen on YouTube, make sure to sub and subscribe. Share those videos around too. You can also help out by becoming a member of the Patreon. There's 2 different memberships. There's the free tier and the paid tier. The paid tier is only $1.99 a month, but you get early access to every episode that I record, and they're on there about 2 months early before they're released publicly. They're all ad-free. Both tiers, you get access to Crinkled Conspiracies, the other podcast I do with Ed Carella that dives into a lot of conspiracy talks and current world happenings. There's also some live videos for the paid tier and discounts for merch and some other goodies that are available, and they're only on the Patreon. So again, make sure to check out the show notes for the link to the Patreon, become a member, and enjoy all the cool things going on over there for less than $2. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. If you get on Facebook, look for Brandon Tinfoil Tales. Make sure to follow me on there. Instagram too. There's also a merch store. There's some stickers and some shirts and a beanie hat and a jacket and some other goodies that are available on the merch store. You can find more information about that in the show notes. I'll also be appearing at several different events this upcoming fall. The first will be September 14th in Dowagiac, Michigan at the Sister Lakes Brewing Company. That's Bigfoots and Brews and Spirits 2. It's being put on by Eric from Uncomfortable Podcast. Make sure to check that one out. On September 27th and 28th will be the first annual Bigfoot Conference in Nashville, Indiana. I'm looking forward to both of those events. You will need to purchase tickets for either of those, so make sure to check out the show notes. There will be links in there that will take you to where you can purchase tickets for. I do know that tickets were selling out pretty quickly for the Indiana Bigfoot Conference, so make sure to get yours while they're still in stock. In October, I'll be appearing and speaking at these 2 events. The first one is ParaUnity 6 on October 19th. That's in Miami County, Indiana at the 4-H Fairgrounds. And then on October 26th, I'll be at the first annual Crawfordsville Paranormal Convention. Both of those events are free to the public. They're all ages. Just bring the whole family out. At all the events that I'll be appearing, I'll have a vendor booth, so I'll have some shirts and some books and some other things for sale. But I'll also have my recording rig, so if you're interested in stopping by and sharing some experiences with me, we can sit down, we can record it, you can be on a future episode. But I think now we're going to go ahead and bring Mark on. I've been looking forward to talking with him. Like I mentioned earlier, the saying you killed a Hat Man or something like that really gets my attention. So I definitely want to talk with him and dive into all that. So looking forward to talking to him and I hope you guys enjoy our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Mark. Mark, thanks for coming on here and talking with me tonight.
Hey, it's a great pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. You reached out to me through Facebook. That's been the go-to way people have been reaching out to me lately is this new Facebook account that I made. And I end up getting like 40 something interviews lined up over the last 2 or 3 months. So it's been chaotic trying to keep up with everything, but it's definitely been a pleasure talking to a lot of people.
Well, you know what they say from that old movie, if you build it, they will come. So it just really speaks to the fact that there's so many different things happening that people can't typically explain. And then they need some sort of forum to either talk about them or explore them or tell other people about them. So you're what you're doing is very timely, and I'm very grateful for it.
Now, like I said, I going on 2 years now. I've always been able to find interviews or stuff, have interviews and everything. But ever since I made that Facebook account, I've still got so many people on there that haven't even scheduled yet, just because I don't have the time right now.
I believe it. I think we first started talking, I think it was it 3 months ago, maybe?
I think it was probably beginning of March.
Yeah.
So almost 3 months ago, about 2.5 months ago.
Jeez.
But yeah, it's I've been trying to explain that to people, and some are like, "Well, why can't I get on sooner?" Well, I'm sorry, I'm doing like 3 or 4 interviews a week as it is, so I have another life that's not podcasting. But yeah, you want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself and what it is that you want to talk about?
Sure. So I'm Mark NeCamp Jr. I'm for lack of a better term, I'm an occult, metaphysical, pagan, spiritual writer and teacher. I've been pursuing these interests for over 25 years now in a more formal fashion. And I've probably been teaching and writing for about, I'd say 15 years or so. And just to give a shameless plug, I just have a book out, just came out last month, end of last month, called Energy Magic. And I'll kind of reference some of the things in that book, some of the techniques. But I didn't want to come here just to promote my book. What really prompted me to reach out to you is aside from all the spiritual writing and teaching I do, I've done a lot of, well, I guess the only umbrella term I can really use is exorcisms. So I'll do everything from, I'll go into a home that has a lot of spiritual activity, and I'll take care of it. I'll dehauntify houses. There's different things that can happen to people. I'll get into it a little bit more, but people can have different entities or even spiritual parasites attached to them, and that's something I take care of on a regular basis as well. But there's different sort of things that people wind themselves getting into and getting into a little bit of spiritual trouble, and one way or another, either I cross their path by some divine providence or people seek me out. So I've been doing that. I've probably been doing exorcisms for probably at least, another like 15 years or so. So
What made you go down this path? There's always like an experience I've figured out that someone has or something happens to where it puts people on these pathways. So what kind of got you going down this way?
Well, in terms of like spirituality and the occult, that was really, when I was a kid, I used to see things, and my mother was very, very open-minded. Just to give you some kind of background. So where I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and probably about 1.5 miles from me was one of the largest spiritual candle stores in the Midwest. They were a spiritual candle supplier. So these are candles for like breaking curses and jinxes to creating prosperity in the home. It was more in the line of what most people call hoodoo, which comes a lot from the African folk magic that was brought over by the slaves, during slavery time, and then kind of transmuted and changed, and kind of have like some occult techniques are kind of blended into it, some herbalism that was indigenous to the flora and fauna of the Americas. But also you get kind of stuff combined with like Christianity, and you get this interesting combination of using Psalms from the Bible with magic. So that was kind of the spiritual hotbed from which I sprang. So that being said, when I was a kid and I said, "Hey, Mom, I think I see something," she's like, "I don't see something, but I'm not going to doubt you." And gradually, I figured out that I was seeing spirits and other entities. Now, what it kind of happened over the years, as I've had more formal training and study, I don't see things as much as I used to, which is probably a good thing, so I can concentrate and live my life on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But I have developed tools to explore these things more consciously, so I'm not at the whim of seeing spirits like all the time. Because if I wasn't using tools to consciously control myself and to access these different things, well, then I would just be, I'd be half crazy, just like talking to spirits or seeing things all the time. Now that being said, if I'm not taking care of myself and if I'm really, really tired, I get really, really psychic, and that's actually kind of fun if I'm around a bunch of people and I said, "Oh, well, um, you cheated on your boyfriend on last time you went on spring break." They're like, "How did you know that?" And I said, "Ah, crap, I've only had 2 hours of sleep and I'm at a bar." So this is also why I don't drink in public very often, and I never drink to get drunk in public, because then my psychic abilities just kind of are a little unhinged. So
I've always made the reference and joke that if you can see things about people or whatever, um, it's almost like you can, not so much like mind reading,
right.
but it's weird how you can pick up on certain aspects to it. And I've always I wish I could have the ability to see into the future, because I would figure out what those lottery numbers are going to be. But that's the when it comes to like psychics and stuff, and I've had other people on here before, and like
Sure.
I know a lot of people have a lot of there's been a lot of grifting, I think, with psychics, so it's given the
Oh,
whole
tons.
aspect. It's give the whole aspect a bad name. I remember back in like the '90s or whatever, call Miss
Mhm.
Cleo for your
Oh yeah. Yep.
all those things you'd see on late night commercials. And I think when people hear the word psychic, that's literally the first thing, at least for me, it was at first for a while, is I always remember Miss Cleo popping up on the infomercials.
Absolutely.
But I do believe people have the ability to connect to a spirit realm. So if that is psychic powers or whatever you want to call them, then I'm more open to understanding that. But when the term psychic gets tossed out, everyone just automatically thinks of that.
Yeah, everyone gets like a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
So and same thing. I mean, a lot of these terms get loaded in our society and pop culture, right? I mean, that's why I don't use the term exorcist a lot, because they're saying, "Oh, are you exorcising demons?" I'll say, "Well, actually, demonic influence is more rare than you think. It's mostly spirits and other entities that I have to deal with on a more regular basis." So
I feel like today's thing, though, it all gets pushed to demonic. Like that is the popular phrasing that
it
everyone
is.
wants to go to. And I think that's
Absolutely.
from these TV shows. That's a gripe for another time, but I feel like that's all these ghost hunting shows and everything out there, like they're entertainment purposes. So I understand
Exactly.
that's what they're for, but almost everything is possession and demons and everything else anymore. I don't even watch this stuff. It's just,
Yeah,
I used to always watch them, and now I'm just like, this is stupid.
I'm the same way, to be quite honest. What really frustrates me, and actually, I'll tell a story that kind of illustrates the point. So, and my poor friend, he gets picked on in the story because I've told this story probably about a dozen times in the last couple of weeks for various reasons. But a friend of mine and his wife, where I lived in Michigan, they were living in a retired funeral home. So, they had an embalming room in the basement, and there's still tools from the that people used, and it was the whole 9 yards. And I go to my friend and I said, "Hey, you're moving into an old funeral home. This place probably needs cleaning out. This is kind of my forte. Do you mind if I clean it out for you?" They're like, "Oh, no, no, we're fine. We got it. We got it." Oh, okay. I'm like, "Call me when you change your mind." They're, "Oh, okay, we're fine." And then some months later, maybe about 6 months later pass. Okay. And they're like, "Oh man, we've been getting some spiritual activity." I said, "Really? You don't say." Like, "Yeah, we're gonna have a paranormal team to come investigate." No, I knew it was going to happen, but I just said, "Okay, call me when you need help." A few months later, I catch up with my friend. I said, "So how'd that paranormal team go?" Like, "Oh, yeah, they had a psychic, and I don't know if we what she was doing." Like, what makes you say that? And he says, "Well, they picked up on all these spiritual phenomena, but it's like they were kind of stirring things up, and it got worse. Things are a lot worse now." I said, "Huh? You don't say." I say, "Would you like no?" Like, "No, no, no, we're fine. We're fine." I'm like, "Oh, okay, okay." So then finally, the wife of my friend's wife calls me. It's probably like midnight, 1 in the morning. I'm trying to get some sleep. And she's saying, "I think there's a spirit attached to my husband." And I say, "You don't say." And she's like, "Can you come over right now?" Now, at this point, I'm feeling a little salty from offering my help like several times. And normally I would have gone there like immediately and just got my kit and, gone to town. I said, "You know what? I'm going to let them stew for a minute." just for a hot minute. And I go over the next day and he did, of course, have a spirit attached to him. And I take care of it and, you know, banished it and scored that energy on. And everything was fine. But the reason I'm telling this story right now is a lot of paranormal teams, they're kind of going in for the novelty. They're going in for the, shall we say, the spiritual thrill seeking. And I get it. I've been there myself. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when I was a new occultist or new into witchcraft or something, I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to go in the cemetery and poke around and see what happens." I mean, we all want to see something that's more than the average. We all want to touch the paranormal, the supernatural. We want to,
Yeah.
also want a little excitement, and that's, I think that's fine. I think it's a healthy instinct. But I think where we get into trouble, myself included, is if anyone's going spiritual thrill seeking and they're not, one, being careful about it, and two, they're not going into even some of the ethics of it. So I think it's where everyone gets into trouble. Now, I'm not saying this from any like ivory tower or any high horse or anything. I come about this from effing around and finding out too many times and saying, "Okay, you know what? I think I need to learn. I think I need to do some study. I think I need to talk to some people. I think I need to figure this out and to figure out, what I'm doing, and more importantly, why am I doing it?"
I feel like if you have these abilities to do like cleanse people, everything, I'm surprised that it's not so much regarded into like, I know it's a hard thing for people to buy into. And
Absolutely.
when you tell people this, I'm surprised you don't get more backlash from them. Just because if someone were to come up to me like, "Oh, you have a spirit attached to you," one of the first things before I ever was doing what I'd be like, "What?" Like, is
Exactly.
this person crazy? Like, what the hell are they talking about? And now that I do this show and everything else, I'm a lot more open minded to it. Like, I'm still very skeptical on a lot of
Sure.
things,
And that's
but
healthy.
it's one of those things for me is like if someone were to come up and tell me that, I'll be like, "Well, okay." I know. How, how do you go about like removing them, and then like how do you know that they're like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
how does someone know that they're actually there, and then someone tells them they've removed them? How does that person actually know if it was they had something and do they feel different afterward? Like how can they
Yeah,
tell?
that's actually a really, really good question. So usually for me, it's other occultists or witches or spiritual people of random or various denominations who will come to me because they're already open minded. They're already, for lack of a better term, they're already initiated into the spiritual. Um, Now, for better or for worse, witchcraft and and the paranormal have gotten a lot more popular. So, as a culture, we're getting more and more open minded, which I think is going to benefit us eventually because um, I can't even remember if it's something a teacher of mine said. I think it was an old teacher of mine said, and that's where I picked it up. But the saying is, just because the gods don't believe in you, just because you don't believe in the gods, doesn't mean the gods don't believe in you. So in a similar vein, I have found that people can get, the effects of spiritual entities and not even know it, and they'll attribute it to something else. So I have noticed that there's a lot of common symptoms, though, and this is where I want to talk about. Actually, so back up. One of the things that I reached out to you about was Hat Man, and I'm gonna build up to that. I don't want to just go right into Hat Man. I want to talk more about kind of like the other things that are not as bad as Hat Man. Okay. And as I've gotten, more experience, and I'm trying to kind of catalog things so I can, pass on this knowledge to other people. I kind of have like a class system now, kind of like it. I always like a little nod to pop culture, but kind of like on Ghostbusters, or like, oh, there's a class for Phantasm or something. So I've actually kind of have a scale of 1 to 10. With 1 is, let's say you go into a room that someone had an argument in, and the room feels weird, and you're like, wow, I don't want to be in this room because I feel like something bad happened in this room. I would say that's a class 1 event. Very, very simple. That's something that can happen with, like, cleansing a room out. Now, I like to cleanse things out with energy, but of course, people can use various herbs, incenses. You can actually use sound. There's a huge tradition of like using bells to clarify, to cleanse a room or an area. Or singing even tones. There's lots of ways to cleanse an area. So anyway, but that's like 1 end of the spectrum is 1. So 10, and I haven't got to 10, thank the gods. But 10 is, for me, is going to be like the apocalypse. Like, if I'm like kind of taking a nod to the Ghostbusters movies, if like Gozer's coming and the world's going to end, that's going to be a 10. Okay. So I would say like a typical haunting, I put that like around like a 4 or 5, like maybe like a 4. That's not too bad. And then, and those aren't too bad. I mean, most spiritual things they're annoying. Okay. And I don't know how much, I probably don't want to go too much into nature of spirits. That's probably takes way too long, but needless to say, what most people think are ghosts or spirits, they're really just echoes. They're energetic echoes of someone that was there for the most part. It can get a little complicated, but for the most part, those are like energetic echoes. Okay. Just like, once again, you go into a room, people argued, you're like, oh, this room feels kind of weird. Now, past spirits or ghosts, people can have like spiritual parasites. So going back to that room example, imagine that someone had an argument, but like they externalized their emotions, okay? And their emotions were kind of pushed out of themselves energetically. Now, of course, here I'm going with the assumption that everyone can believe with me for a moment that everything is made of energy. Okay? And you know what I mean by energy here?
Yeah. Basically, to my understanding of life, we are all energy and we're all frequencies and vibrations.
Exactly.
And the energies, it's my last interview. I actually talked with someone prevalent in the Bigfoot community, but he's also a very firm believer now in the quantum realm. So basically, there's energies and there's frequencies and vibrations or whatever, and we're all basically just a mixture. And you can't destroy energy. It's just I without going into like the whole scientific term, I understand what you're meaning. Yes.
All right. We're on the same energetic page, pun intended.
Yeah.
So, so like one exercise, real quick, that your listeners can try, and it's like the first exercise in my book, is if you take your hands and you rub them together vigorously, and you just imagine that the invisible life energy, the energy of everything, that's the foundation of everything, the energy that connects us all. As you rub your hands together vigorously, imagine the energy in your body and the energy in the room you're in, and imagine that being centered in your hands, and then keep rubbing them vigorously, and then stop. Maybe like do this for like 30 seconds or so, and then put your hands very slowly apart, maybe about a few inches, maybe like about, I don't know, 5 or 6, no more than 5 or 6 inches. 3 or 4 is probably good. And then put your hands very slowly together but don't let them touch. And then do it again, and just kind of play with this energy that you've generated, moving your hands very slowly apart and very slowly together without letting them touch. And you'll feel this tension. It'll feel like this warmth, and it'll feel kind of weird. And you're like, whoa, what is that? And that's energy. Now, everyone can do magic, and everyone shapes energy. So if you're in a chat room and it's like a really charged subject and there's a troll saying something stupid, they're manipulating the energy through their emotions. And that's why sometimes like certain people also like make us feel weird or not. Now, extrapolating upon that, different places have different energies, and then spirits have different energies. And if everything's energy, energy of course can't be created or destroyed, but humans are always generating energy. We're eating food and we're breathing air, we're drinking water. We're kind of like our own miniature energetic ecosystems, okay? By virtue of the fact that we have a physical body. Now, you take the physical body away, and there's kind of like an energetic remnant of us. Now, our souls, that's a whole different conversation, but I believe our souls, of course, pass on to a different realm, whether it's be heaven or reincarnation or even hell if you're unlucky. But I don't want to talk about what happens when you die. That's a whole different conversation. But what matters for all intents and purposes here is that the part of the consciousness is gone somewhere else. The physical body's gone, but there's an energetic remnant which can go someplace else, but sometimes a part of it remains. And that's what the typical spirit is. Okay. Now, going to energetic parasites, people can have bad days and have very intense emotions, and those emotions almost have a life of their own, like a spirit or a ghost. And sometimes those turn into parasites. Now, the thing is, all these energetic things need more energy. We give our own spirits energy just all the time, but these things, these spirits, these energetic parasites, they need to acquire and feed off of energy to keep their existence. And it's very instinctual. So where ghosts go bad, and this is where I'm actually working on trying to train paranormal investigators, and I'm kind of starting this crusade very shortly, is, some spirits are just echoes, they're memories, they're fairly innocent, they're fairly harmless. But some things will drain your energy. You'll drain your life energy in order to survive on a very instinctual level. And those things can actually have health benefits. I mean, I'm sorry, health detriments. And they can cause people's health to actually get worse. So going back to the original question, I'm sorry, it kind of took a long way to answer it. But if you're in a place and it feels kind of off, and you can't explain why it feels off, and if you get fatigue over time, you're probably, like, lack of a better term, ghost food, and they're kind of sucking your energy. And at that point, you should have someone send those spirits on and actually exercise them. Or there's various other methods, of course. I talk about in my book about how you can create a portal and escort those energies to where they should go. But you can also trap them in something like a crystal or an object and things like that. I don't highly recommend that unless you're trained. But banishing a spiritual energy through a portal is very easily to learn. It's a very simple process.
Where do the energies and spirits go once they're banished?
All right, so I talk about a lot how there's like a fourfold aspect of the self. Okay, so you and I, we have a physical body, obviously. We die, that's worm food. Then we have an energetic component, which is, we can also call the astral component, as in, people have an astral body. And the energetic or astral body is very much tied to our emotions. So you can also call it an emotional body. Okay. Then you're going to have your consciousness, your higher faculties, and we can call that, our mental body. It's a part of you that's aware of everything, that reasons, that, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. And then there's more of a spiritual component. And then if we want to listen to literally every single religious and mystical tradition that's ever existed, we can all say that we're all connected because we all come from the same source. In different schools and religions, we'll call that source something different. But I think we can all agree that we all
There's
come
one
from
power.
one source. There's one power, okay? There's one source.
Yeah.
And that is like the very, that's where that spiritual component comes in. So talking about these 4 aspects of the self. Now, in the Hermetic school of the occult, there's a saying called "as above, so below," and people toss this around all the damn time. But what that really means, actually, kind of going back to the Bible, even, is where the Bible says, man was created in God's image. Now, the esoteric truth of this, the esoteric meaning, is that every human being is a reflection of the universe. So that the microcosm, the little self, is a reflection of the macrocosm, the universe, or the big self. And there's an interplay, and there's an interconnected nature. So they're all related. Now, so I have an energetic body. Let's say I'm a ghost. There's a little ghost marker running around. And it's just like a remnant. Now, what a practitioner would do is they would create a portal to the astral, which, once again, the astral, the energetic, the emotional, it's all the same stuff. You can create a portal to the astral and just suck that energy back where it's supposed to, and then and as I like to say, let entities of a higher pay grade than myself take care of that energy. So I'm not about to go to the astral realm and like start recycling spirits. I have no idea how to do, well, actually, I do have an idea how to do that, but that's not my job. I'm sure there's other entities and there's other mechanisms for such things. And even if someone like myself or another exorcist isn't going to remove a spirit or banish it to the astral, which is really what we're doing, is it would fade over the time. Now, this happens. You don't see it so much nowadays because a lot of people get cremated, and embalming techniques are a little different. But if you kind of go to a cemetery, you might see this kind of haze, especially non-Catholic ones, and that's a whole different reason. There's a reason for that, but you'll see this in cemeteries. Almost see like if your eyes are slightly out of focus, you'll kind of see like almost like a mist, or you'll kind of see something, like, you know what I mean?
No.
Okay. Basically, where I'm going is when a body's buried, the energetic component it just kind of decomposes. There's decomposition energy, and the energy would go naturally. Now, unfortunately, with ghosts, the energy is so concentrated that the decomposition process is going to take a lot longer. So just like there's a half-life on chemicals, if you go to chemistry and talk about like like with carbon dating, how there's a half-life of carbon. There's kind of a similar thing with energy, but I'm going way off topic. I'm going on very too specific and esoteric, but to kind of go back to the original question, to answer that is, yeah, everything's energy, and there's spirits, there's parasites, and there's other things that like feed off of the energy of humanity. And usually it's very instinctive. Now, any questions on that, or any thoughts before I kind of go on another tangent?
There's been a lot of discussions on my podcast where there are lower, I don't know what the correct term would be. Some people claim demons, some people claim low vibration feeding, negative energy feeding
Sure.
things. Some people call them reptilians. Like there's
there's
all sorts of things that get thrown out there, but it's basically all the same thing, as the fact that there's something out there that feeds on humans' energy.
Absolutely. Now, I could probably classically, as someone who's worked with demons a little bit, I can say that classical demons feel a little different. They actually feel a lot different than like the more shadowy stuff that feeds on things. So like when I'm talking about like parasites, these parasites are very much made of a very shadowy sort of energy. Okay. And this shadowy energy it's just kind of ooky and it's kind of nasty, and it has different kind of, lack of a better term, has its own different vibrations, and some of it is more dark, some of it is more, it's still kind of like icky and nasty, but it's not as shadowy. So you have kind of different levels of this low vibrational gook, with the worst of it being more shadowy. Okay. And this is a little different than actual demons. But everyone calls it like demons. And there needs to be like some better terminology about this sort of thing, but it is what it is, right? So for lack of a better term, we'll call this energy demonic, even though I'd like to once again make a distinction from like classical demons, especially those found in like the Lesser Key of Solomon or the Goetia, the Goetic demons. So there's a difference there. That's a whole different podcast. But there's people who will tap into this demonic energy and they'll work with it, for usually to gain power. Usually, they're in a bad place and they're full of ego and they get connected to something, lack of a better term, dark and powerful, and they start working with it and really bad things happen. So you have people, for lack of a better term, you can call them, I guess you call them demonic practitioners. But even they would say, oh, I'm working with a demon, but what they're doing is they're not actually working with demons. They're working with the idea of like a low vibrational entity. That kind of rings a little bit more true. Because they're just not constructive. They're very instinctual. They're very much like rabid animals, just trying to feed. Now, when they're not so rabid and they're trying to feed, that's when it gets a little scary. So let me kind of move the conversation up. So I kind of put a call out when I was moving from Michigan. I kind of put a call out saying, hey, I'm leaving the state and I'm not going to be in Michigan for a while. If anyone has a last call for like, it's kind of last call for drinks at the bar, but it's like last call for exorcisms before I leave Michigan. And a friend of mine contacted me. We're just good friends then. We're better friends now. And he said, hey, I kind of got this weird thing. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, I've been feeling really fatigued, and I've heard you talk about how spiritual entities can make you feel fatigued. I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking he's just got like a parasite or something. And I'm like, what are your symptoms? And for some of these parasites, the symptoms can be mood swings. That's a big one. So if someone's infected by a parasite, they'll often, especially the darker they are, and by darker I mean more shadowy, they'll have problems with light. They'll have light sensitivity. They'll have fatigue, and they'll have emotional, very wild mood swings, either major depression or usually major violence. And it depends on how you deal with those energies. It depends if you're dealing with those things more internally or externally. Okay. So I'm thinking he's going to tell me he's got a parasite. And he's like, no. He's like, I got fatigue, but it's like I saw an entity and it had like red eyes and it was very shadowy. I'm like, oh, that's pretty messed up. I'm like, what other symptoms do you have? And I'm trying to be open-minded at this point. Now I'm trying not to like classify what he's telling me about. I'm just trying to like be receptive and try to learn and understand. Okay. And he's like, well, I've had like sleep paralysis and nightmares. I'm like, oh, that's weird. And it kind of reminded me that when I was a kid, I had sleep paralysis really bad. And I used to see shadowy entities at my bed. And I didn't think anything of it because it hadn't happened since I was a kid. And but it kind of jogged this memory, which is interesting. And on a tangent, I have noticed that with these parasites, and even with what I'm about to talk about as Hat Man, there's actually some sort of weird memory thing that they do. It's almost like this weird memory trick where you don't really remember them sometimes. And I think it's almost a self-preservation thing. Unfortunately for them, I'm immune to this trick. So joke's on them. So anyway, my friend's telling me all these things about sleep paralysis, nightmares, etc. Well, that sounds pretty bad. And I'm like, well, why are you calling me now? He's like, well, my mom can see him. And now this guy I'm talking to, he's pagan. He's he does magic. He's a magical practitioner. And so when you do magic, you kind of have to sensitize yourself to spiritual energies in order to work with them. Okay. That's why a lot of practitioners work on shielding, because they're more sensitive than the average person. So I'm like, oh, he's sensitive. He can kind of see stuff, whatever. Then he said, my mom can see it now, and she doesn't do magic. And she's as normal, or to use the Harry Potter term, she's as muggle as they come. And I was like, oh, crap, that's really bad. That means it's taking a bunch of energy in order to be that manifest. So I keep probing him, and I find out that he kind of had like a health thing, almost like a heart problem, and that we could trace it back to 4 generations of his family having heart problems, and they all died almost the exact same age. 4 generations on one side of the family. And that's freaking weird, man. So then I start thinking, I'm like, huh, whoever this shadowy thing is, it's traveling, it's stealing their life energy, and it's got like one hand on one generation and one hand on the other. And then after the previous generation dies, it moves on to the next and keeps working itself up the generational ladder, so to speak. And so I'm realizing, well, crap, this isn't just a normal exorcism. If this thing's stealing life energy, I'm really obliged to like help this guy out. And, if not just save his life eventually and give him a few more decades of life, but, also his mom. So I'm like, oh, crap. Now here's where it gets weird is every time we were supposed to get together, something weird would happen. Like his power would go out or something would come up. And there's like almost like this force preventing us from like connecting. This is kind of weird. And so then I was living with a buddy of mine at the time who was also into magic. And we were talking about this. He's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. He's like, be careful. I'm like, yeah, I will, obviously. And I didn't think anything of it until I had a nightmare. And I didn't even know it was a nightmare. I thought I was just having a lucid dream. And I didn't even think, I'm sorry, to go back, I didn't even think it was a lucid dream. I actually thought I was awake because my roommate came into the room and he started talking to me. And then all of a sudden his face turned skeletal and demonic. And I woke up in a cold sweat. And I realized I wasn't awake, but that was a nightmare. But just like one of the more vivid nightmares I've had in years. And then I feel around in my room and like something's not right in my room. And I forgot to tell you, the day before my roommate was having nightmares too, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together until this. So I said, okay, whatever's plaguing my friend is now it's plaguing me. Now, I did do some research of I did a Google search. I felt like I was an episode of Supernatural or something. We're like, oh, let's Google the thing of like what the spiritual baddie of the week is. And I googled like all this guy's symptoms, and it came up with Hat Man, and I started reading about Hat Man, and there's a story actually about on one side about how this guy's daughter can see Hat Man now, and when she couldn't before, and I was like, oh, the generational thing, and people complain about fatigue and nightmares and sleep paralysis. I'm like, okay, so I'm dealing with Hat Man. So fast forward, I'm in my bedroom. It's like 3 a.m. I've got my spiritual tools already laid out at my altar because I already have, because that's how I roll anyway. And I was like, all right, we're gonna go to town. And while I'm waking up and I'm about to go to town with Hat Man, I realize that these things have a hive mind. And because I was going to attack the Hat Man that was plaguing my friend, they sent one after me. That's where they screwed up. That was a big mistake. So I basically created what's called a triangle manifestation, which comes from ceremonial magic in the West. And I made a triangle with candles, and I pulled upon, and I tapped into my connection to the Hat Man, and I basically put him into this triangle manifestation, with sheer will. And of course, with intention and visualization and such. And it was this entity, and my second sight isn't as good as it used to be because, like I explained earlier, I kind of shut my sight down so I can function, but I still feel energy. I can feel energy as if I can feel something solid. And I put my hands in front, actually, I go and I put my hands in the triangle and I feel it. And it's trapped, but it's not happy. And I feel around it, and from what I can see, I can see it's just about my height. I was like, okay, I can deal with this. So I've got a lot of spiritual tools I deal with certain things. One of them is like a furba, which is a Tibetan dagger, which can literally kind of poke a hole in something spiritual and kind of goes bye-bye. Excuse me. I also have various swords and sacred knives and that are enchanted and blah, blah, blah. And one of them I enchanted with pretty much the holy energy of the Archangel St. Michael, specifically his flaming sword. And so I go to town on Hat Man, And probably about half hour, 45 minutes later, I'm sweating, I'm tired, and I feel around for it thinking I beat the crap out of it, but it's still there. The only thing that's different is it shrunk. So I said, what I did, I realized, was I took out some of its energy. So I go to town again for another half hour. Still not gone. I shrunk it down some more, about halfway down, just approximately. I repeat this process for about 2.5 hours, and I'm exhausted, and I'm sweating, and God, I kind of wanted to die at this point. But I still had like my some willpower and survival instinct, and I grabbed a crystal, and I put the Hat Man into a crystal, and I trapped him in a crystal, and that's where he is. So I couldn't completely get rid of it, and banishing by any other means wasn't working. But I was able to take it down a notch and trap it in a crystal. And right now it's, as I jokingly say, it's prisoner zero. That was the first Hat Man I took care of. And he is in a hermetically sealed shed in an undisclosed location, and I need to deal with him eventually. Now, the Hat Man of my friend, I went to visit him and did the same process, but his Hat Man was significantly more well fed after feeding off of 4 or 5, maybe even 10 generations. I have no idea. This thing was about 9 feet tall and nasty. And I repeated the process and eventually trapped in a crystal. And then we drove to a Catholic cemetery and we buried that crystal and let the local priest, or I should say the spirit of the local priest, who was practically a saint in that area, take care of it from there. And I've dealt with some other Hat Men. I think I've killed about 4 or 5 of them now. I've got a few of them in storage because I want to figure out the exact nature of them a little bit more. And others, of course, I've buried, and that the earth can take care of those energies, and I'll let entities of a higher pay grade take care of that. But that's basically my process for getting rid of Hat Man. It's tapping into the connection, and you can do this. I learned how to do this at a distance, but tapping into the connection, putting him in a triangle manifestation, tearing him down a few notches until he's small enough and more manageable to go in a crystal, and then dealing with that crystal. Now, the ones I have saved are in a hermetically sealed trunk, and that's a whole different story. But that's basically my story with Hat Man. And on my scale of like 1 to 10, I found Hat Man to probably be about 6. Now, we're probably wondering what's higher on the scale, and that's where you get groups of stuff. So I actually have to go to exercise a house that has everything from a platoon of revolutionary soldier ghosts and children ghosts, and oh man, it's like out of like Paranormal Activity mixed with like Japanese horror. Well, that house I'd probably classify as a 6. And then I'd probably deal like a group of Hat Men, like maybe a half a dozen Hat Men, as like a 7. So, yeah.
What would be the worst thing for you then? What would you consider a 10?
10 well, here's where I get a little scared. I'll be quite honest with you. I normally don't say I'm scared of anything because I'm literally killing an urban legend, and I'm not flinching too much. The first one was a little scary, but after that, I kind of got into a rhythm. But I started thinking like, well, shoot, they obviously have a hive mind, that's kind of weird. And I was like, this was after I think I take care of my second or third Hat Man. And I was just kind of drinking some scotch and just ruminating. And I said, they have a hive mind. Is there a queen? Is there something similar? Is there something that's actually kind of pulling the strings? And then I thought about like some stuff. I dealt with the parasites, and I know those parasites can be really small, but those parasites these kind of shadowy parasites that really should only be removed with like literally psychic surgery of unzipping someone's aura and removing it very, very carefully, limb by spidery limb, and then sealing the person back up and healing them. But those things can get bigger, and I kind of felt that there was bigger and bigger ones. So it made me think that somewhere out there's something really, really big, really, really nasty, with the ability to control things that are in a hive mind. And I don't know what that thing is. And I don't know if it's real. This is pure conjecture. But fudge, man, if that actually exists, yeah, that would be 10 for sure.
You kind of feel like, and I don't, not to like poke fun or anything, but you're almost like a real life Ghostbuster. Has
Yeah,
anyone ever,
kind of.
has anyone ever said that?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that. And, I kind of want to like get, kind of get this information out. And this is actually kind of the reason I reached out is I want people to understand this stuff more and more that, if their life kind of gets messed up a little bit and I don't want to, so for everything I do now, granted, I've literally summoned angels and demons and spoke to gods and literally been possessed by gods and had gotten other people possessed by gods. I've done a lot of crazy stuff, which is definitely outside the norm, even for people who are occultists. But that being said, I even acknowledge that some magic is just applied psychology. That not that it's BS or anything, but there is a psychological component to, especially like things for like healing or even like curse work. For a time, this is a very long story, but for a time I had a reputation of being like, this amazing curse worker that, if someone did something wrong, if they looked at me wrong, I was going to curse them and their cat would die or they get into a car accident or something like that. And for a hot minute, people were like pretty afraid of me until they realized it was just a stupid rumor. Now, that being said, can I do all that? Well, yeah, of course I can. I'm not going to do it because that would just be destructive and not very nice. And I try to be a good person that makes the world a better place. But I didn't have to like do anything. People would have random accidents after they saw me, and it was just that's a real mind working against them. That's a real magic working against them. So I have to keep in mind that sometimes it's on one hand, maybe it's more psychology. On the other hand, maybe it's like woo crazy mysticism. But I like to try to be balanced in the middle. Now, all that being said, once I've done psychic surgery on someone, removed a parasite, or once I've banished a hat man into a crystal, the people's lives have gotten better. People have said, wow, I don't have any accidents anymore, or people aren't repulsed by me, or I have more energy than I've had in a lifetime, or my depression is lifted. Now, I'm not trying to say that everyone who's like on inpatient in a psych ward is the victim of like spiritual entities. That'd be horrible to say. I'm not going to make that assumption. At the same time, I cannot disprove and I cannot go against the evidence of my own experience and that of other practitioners that when you do a thing to get rid of a thing, people's lives get better. And these people have various degrees of like, shall we say, faith in the paranormal or the occult. So I don't know. That's kind of the thing that does kind of concern me is I have noticed that these things are happening with more and more frequency. So, and I don't want to get into it because it's a very long story. It's a little heartbreaking. But, there are people that understand there's parasites and understand there's things like Hat Man, and they'll seek them out. They'll cultivate the relationships with them, and they'll use those to get, shall we say, more nefarious things done. Now, I was talking to one practitioner, and they actually, a Hat Man was actually sent after a relative of theirs. So I know it's possible to theoretically travel in the astral, connect with these things, make some sort of deal, shall we say. And usually the deal is, yeah, I'll be your vessel, or yeah, I'll do some really messed up stuff in exchange for you giving me your power. And people will do that. The worst of them, man, sort of take forever to learn to tell. But I came across a drug dealer that was using basically demonically infused drugs to like get people more addicted. So even though there's random people that like random bad spiritual stuff happen to, every blue moon, and it's rare, it's very, very rare. So I don't want everyone to get like paranoid about this. But there are individuals who are very nefarious, who know exactly what they're doing, that say, wow, I think I'm going to prey on this person, and it's going to make me feel good today.
I don't really, never really thought about stuff like that. So kind of gives me something to worry about, I guess.
It's very, very rare. I mean, it's like, I mean, even all this stuff is really rare. So, okay, real quick. So I had a therapist that was a Catholic priest, and we're shooting the breeze about exorcisms. And they're like, "Oh man, you're a Catholic priest. I got to know, man." Like, and he wasn't active anymore, so he kind of talk a little more casually. And so I was saying, "So tell me about exorcisms in the Catholic Church." He's like, "Well, I've never done one, and I don't even know anyone that's done one." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, but I will tell you this: the church has an unofficial 2% rule." I said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's a 2% rule." Like, I'm like, "All right, all right. Well, tell me more." And he says, "Well, the church gets called in, about an exorcism, and they do like an investigation, and 98% of the time it's mental illness or fatigue or sometimes like a panic attack or even they're faking it." He's like, 98% of the time, a demonic possession can be debunked fairly easily. I said, "Okay, that's pretty cool." And then he says, "But then there's a 2%. And it's a 2% where they've ruled out everything after a very thorough investigation with priests who are actually trained therapists. And at that point, they'll do the rite of exorcism and it works. And no one can quite explain how, other than it's a miracle that something spiritual happened, whether it's a demon or something else, that's conjecture. But 2% of the time, the church will do an exorcism and it will make someone's life better. So, of course, Catholicism is like the largest sect of Christianity, and Christianity is the largest religion in the West. So that kind of makes you think about like the numbers, very loosely about how rare exorcisms are and how rare we are actually the kind of at the mercy of like these dark spiritual entities. So I want the good news is most of this stuff is rare. Most of this stuff can be explained. But if it can't be, if you've ruled out everything, you might want to find somebody like me and at the very least, let someone do an investigation. Make sure that they have some idea what they're doing. Ideally, references are nice. Like I have people I can give reference. I have references, and that'd be nice because God's help us all if like we're the victim of some sort of spiritual entity and people are just suffering for no reason and they don't have to suffer. I hate people to needlessly suffer. So
I don't know
this is
too many
also
people want everyone to suffer or whatever. That's kind of why I want to do what I do, is because I feel like there's people out there that don't get a chance to talk about some of the stuff that they deal with, and
yeah.
some people struggle with a lot of this stuff. I always trying to. I feel like I try and help in the way that I can help, if that makes any sense. Like I can't really
Yeah, of
physically
course.
go out and do something, but maybe giving someone a chance to talk about it's my way of trying to help people.
Every little bit helps. It's I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have to like really talk about these things as a culture. And that's the thing, right? We're really good about talking about things on the internet about cat pictures and memes, but not so good about talking about deep issues. But eventually, we're going to have to reach a point as a culture where we're not talking about cat memes as much. Why do I have cat memes on the head? Anyway. Oh, I'm thinking I can have cheeseburger because I'm thinking about from back in the day. Anyway, God, I feel old. Probably there's gonna be listeners who are younger, like I can ask cheeseburger. What are you talking about? Like, let's look it up. Like cat memes. Anyway, and the what we really need to get better about is having deeper conversations about spirituality and our emotions and death and how to live life. Because when we have these deeper conversations and we can live our lives more consciously and create a society that's more conscious, well, then a lot of these problems are going to be eliminated. Like all these problems of like, rogue demonic practitioners. Excuse me. Being over cold. Random like demonic practitioners, that'll be, a lot less. Or people that are having spiritual problems, there'll be a lot less. But, you know, I guess I'll start some podcasts like this where we kind of talk about these things and try to help each other be more open-minded, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to let the audience know a little bit more about your book before we wrap this one up?
Sure. So, my book, once again, is called Energy Magic, and that's magic with a K, so Magick. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. If you favor a particular occult or spiritual bookstore and they don't carry it, they can refer to my website that has the wholesaler information. And my website is marknecampjr.com. So it's MarkNecampjr.com. And I'm doing a lot of cool stuff. I'm doing I got some speaking engagements over the summer. I'm working on like 4 other books. I have a nonprofit where 10% of all my book royalties are going to improve the spiritual communities that I've been a part of, with half of that actually going directly to like things like women's shelters and women's circles and things like that. Because one, I want to get back to my community, and I have to acknowledge that as a pagan occult witchcraft writer, that a lot of my audience is female, and I'd be kind of a jerk for not trying to give back to those communities. And also at the same time, I've done a lot of personal work, and if you're doing magic right, and if you're doing spirituality right, you're going to look back on your actions from anywhere from a few years ago, maybe even to a few months ago, and think, man, I did some messed up stuff, and what I did was cringy, or what I did isn't in my ethics of where I'm at now. And in that spirit of trying to make amends, I wanted to give back, give back to like those communities. So
That's a good thing to try and give back to the people and the communities and everything else. So, but I will let everyone know that the show notes for this will have all your information in there. So if anyone wants to get a copy of your book or reach out to you or whatever, I will make sure it's all in there for them.
I appreciate that. And I'm very approachable. I try to be like probably the most approachable occult writer you'll ever meet. So all my social information's on there. Just reach out to me if you have any questions. And I mean, honestly, I don't care if I get like 100 Instagram messages after this podcast. I mean, if I can help just even a handful of people, it'll be worth it.
I won't say you're going to get 100 Instagram messages. I barely get anything on Instagram.
Okay.
That's the one thing I don't understand is Instagram and Twitter. It's I have them. I got some followers, but there's no traction on there for me. I don't think, maybe because I don't use it enough or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you haven't like worked with the algorithm. It's a whole thing, but yeah, I mean, yeah, my book also teaches a lot of like the techniques that anyone would need, and it starts off very, very basic, like with the energy ball I talked about, and it goes all the way to like banishing spirits through a portal. And so I don't want to be as much as I do enjoy helping people, and honestly, it is kind of fun saying, oh man, I'm going to go on a case and I've got like a fun story to tell. At the same time, I'd be really happy if every single person on the planet could like learn how to talk to spirits and do exorcisms and do energy healing and all the esoteric stuff that I do, so that they're empowered on their own and they don't need an external guide, that they just feel empowered and they have the knowledge and power of their own selves.
Then you would be out of a job.
I would, honestly, I have like a 13-year plan. It was a 10-year plan. Now it's 13-year. And I'm writing so many books and I'm researching so many things. And I have so many magical projects that if everyone can do everything that I've done in the first book, by the time you get to like my book 100, you'll be like, oh, okay, now I got the foundation to do all this stuff. We're good. So, so I'll always be working. I'll always be learning. I'll always be a student. I'll always be helping people. I'm never going to be out of a job. But
I do have a couple questions before we wrap this up. Like when you go into someone's house to exercise or whatever, get rid of is that something you do? Like if someone were to reach out to you and want you to come do that for them, I know there's some people that they just do it, but I've heard other ones that want to charge for it too, and that's kind of where I get hung up
Oh
on.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. People charge like a crap ton. It's stupid. And this is kind of going back to you know, our conversation on psychics. Like, one time I did get a reading, a psychic reading. Not from anyone that was like a witch or an occultist. It was like one of those stores of like, psychic readings and that you see in different towns. And I said, what the heck? I'll give them a call. I'll try. And I get a reading, and I swear to you, the reading was like half wrong. Now I'll give it to him for getting stuff half right, but it was half wrong. And then they said, well, Mr. Mark, you have a curse on you, and I will happily do this $350 candle to like help fix you. And I was like, give me a break. Now, that being said, some people actually do have curses on them, and it takes a lot of energy, and it might actually take some tools and resources, and it might take that much money. It's rare, but it does happen. So I'm not trying to knock people that do, but most of those people that are not trained practitioners, actually almost, I'd probably say all of them, make a gross generalization, it's maybe 1%, I guess. Those people are just trying to make a buck. Now, what I do, I'll clean your house for free. Now, if it's a house cleansing, I'll probably just teach you how to do it. Or I might even remote in, and by that I mean I'll astral travel to your house and do something, or teach you how. I'll walk you through it. Now that's like for a house cleansing. Now if you have like a parasite, I'd probably refer you to someone, and I might or I might do it myself because I do travel a bit, and I try to be accessible. So, I might help you out directly, or just teach someone that you trust how to do it. So there's that. Now, if you've got something like a hat man, do not F around and find out. Please feel free to contact me. I mean, at the end of the day, you'll probably learn my techniques. But if you're not familiar with shielding, with working with energy, with banishing, if you're not familiar with these things as familiar as you are with your ABCs, do not F around and find out, please, for your own sake. I'll happily help you at no charge. And the reason I don't charge, like you go on my website and it goes services. Now, I used to do tarot readings, but I don't do tarot readings publicly anymore. I'll do tarot readings for like friends for birthdays, but I don't professionally do tarot readings anymore, even though I've did them for like 20 years. And I probably should charge for like exorcisms, honestly, because of all the energy. But if you have me do an actual exorcism, honestly, the only thing I'll ask for payment is like a feed me afterwards and give me something to drink, because I'll be so drained of my own life energy afterwards that if I don't eat something immediately, I'll be in like jeopardy of my own well-being. If it's a really, really intense, almost like quote unquote horror movie sort of situation. So, but the reason I do that is I've noticed that the people who are living in haunted houses are usually people who are poor and do not have the money. So these are places of quote unquote low vibration sometimes, and water flows down drains. In a similar way, things flow downhill, and usually the people of like who are more poor and not well off are the victims of being in like shoddy housing, and whether that housing is of poor construction or even haunted. So I've noticed the people that need me the most are the ones that can't afford it. So that's why I'll do all this stuff. Excuse me. That's why I do all this stuff for free.
No, I just wanted to make sure because I know there's people out there that do stuff like this, but then they want to charge, and then that's kind of where I went back to, like you even brought it up, like with the whole psychic thing. Is like when they start to ask for a lot of money for things, how can you tell that if anything's been done, or are they just trying to grift on people? Because within this community, I've noticed there are a lot of people that do that type of stuff.
No, it's very, very difficult, and so once again, that's why I do stuff for free. Now, the converse of that is sometimes people don't appreciate something or think something is legitimate unless they pay for it.
Yeah.
So I'm running that risk, but I'd rather run the risk of people that need me have access to like what I can do to help them as opposed to not. Now, I'm not knocking people that do charge for it because, I'm very grateful that I don't have to make money off my spirituality. I have a full-time job. I do sales and marketing for a living. I'm out of the quote unquote broom closet at work, so I don't worry about that. That's why, the reason I use my real name. So I'm not worried about that. I don't have to make money off my books. I don't have to make money off of exorcisms. I have a luxury of doing it. Now, some people don't. And so and sometimes that's their calling and that's what they're called to do. So, I'm not going to knock people that make money off spirituality. I mean, that's what priests do. I mean, there's tithing to the church and priests get paid a salary. So I'm not gonna knock people like that, but I'm just gonna say for myself, because my goal is to teach and help as many people as possible in this incarnation. I personally am not going to charge, and that's just my ethics, and not everyone shares that, and that's totally okay.
No, I get it, and like I said, I respect that you're able to do that. Try and help people the best you can. I know if you've ever thought about it, maybe it just you don't charge, but you will accept donations. Maybe they'll feel better if they donate something.
Yeah, and you know what? That's another reason I've got a nonprofit. I don't have donations set up for my nonprofit yet. It is filed. I'm still working on the the IRS stuff. So eventually, if people want to say, "Hey, I feel like I should pay you something," you can donate to my nonprofit. Eventually, and I should have that up in the ability to take donations in a few months, and also just in case anyone's like, "Oh, what's going to happen to my donation money?" Remember how I said like my royalties are going 10% of my book royalties are going to my nonprofit?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm actually going to take screenshots of my royalties from like my publisher, and I'll have screenshots of the bank account, and so people can see transparently where money goes, and so people know that I'm walking my talk. Because there's a lot of nonprofits out there that are spiritual, and they say, "Oh, they do this," and there's even like a couple pagan ones or occult ones, and they're like, "Oh, we're doing this with the money, we're doing this," and they're just not really transparent. I'm like, well, why am I going to donate money to like have like Jimmy the High Priestess, drink beers every Friday night when he should be giving that money to like stop sex trafficking or something? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just you just don't know. But I'm trying to lead by example and have my stuff be as transparent as possible. But if there's anyone who's like, wow, Mark, you gave me some good advice or you really helped me, go ahead and buy my book. I mean, I don't get a lot of royalties from books, believe it or not. So
I've
if you
got a couple books too, so I understand.
Yeah. But if anyone is feeling grateful, they can buy a book. If they're feeling really, really grateful, you could get a bunch of friends together and you could, maybe fly me out and I'll teach like a bunch of workshops. I mean, if you go on my website for classes, there's like a ton of workshops I teach, and there's even more stuff on there that I could teach that I don't even know. I mean, I'm kind of like the Swiss Army knife of the occult. So,
well, again, anyone out there listening, if you want to reach out to Mark, make sure to check the show notes because all of his information of how to get a hold of him and where he can find his book and everything will be in there. But I think we can probably wrap this up. Is there anything you want to let the audience know before we do?
no, I would just say, real quick, the greatest defense I found against all the spiritual stuff, whether it's spiritual parasites or Hat Man or even like people throwing curses, because it happens. Is really take care of yourself. Like dark magic will like kind of flows like water, and it will seep into your weaknesses. So if you have a bad habit of like eating sweets, and you went to the doctor, and your doctor might say you're pre-diabetic, well, for the love of the gods, cut down on the sweets and try not to be diabetic, and because if dark stuff is happening at you, it's going to attack your body. Or if it's, if you're already like a kind of a paranoid person, go to therapy. Everyone has a weakness. I don't care who you are. I mean, Superman had kryptonite. Everyone has a weakness. So if you want to prevent spirits from draining your life force or bad things happening spiritually, do your best to take care of yourself on a regular basis. Do energetic hygiene. purify yourself, cleanse yourself, eat good food, stay hydrated, get good sleep. All these things are so much more powerful than almost anything else in terms of like not only quality of life but defense against anything dark.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's some good advice, but we're going to go ahead now and wrap this one up. So again, I want to say thanks to Mark. So thanks for coming on here tonight. And I want to say thanks to the audience for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. But again, we're going to roll on out. So good night, everyone.
Good night, and thanks, Brandon.
Yep. And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in the headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptic creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history, they don't want us to know the secrets they hide, the truth they won't show. Dominate our society, they keep us in chains. But I'm standing tall, it's time to break the reins. Control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history